All right, let's talk about one of the most mind-bending phenomena in all of neuroscience. It's a condition that makes us question everything we think we know about seeing, and maybe even about consciousness itself.
So let me just start with a question that sounds, well, impossible. Can you see something without being aware that you see it? I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right? Seeing is awareness. But what if I told you it's not always that simple?
The condition is called blindsight, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's this incredible ability of people who are cortically blind, meaning the part of their brain that's supposed to create conscious vision is damaged, to react to things they swear they cannot see. And nope, this isn't some sci-fi thought experiment, it's a real thing.
To really get our heads around this, let's meet one of the first patients ever studied, a man known only as DB. What you're looking at here is his visual field. In those shaded areas, DB was, for all intents and purposes, completely blind. If you flashed a light there and asked him if he saw it, he'd say, "No, of course not, that's my blind spot." But DB was about to unlock a huge secret about how our brains really work.
So this creates a really interesting scientific problem, right? How in the world you test someone's vision when they are absolutely convinced they can't see a thing? Well, the researchers came up with a brilliantly simple idea. They turned it into a guessing game.
Here's the setup. Step 1. They flash a little spot of light somewhere in the patient's blind zone. Step 2, and this is no surprise, the patient says, "Nope, saw nothing." But then came Step 3, the big twist. The researchers would say, "Look, I know you didn't see anything, but if you absolutely had to, just take a wild guess. Where do you think it was?"
You can imagine the patients would feel, well, pretty silly. They'd say things like, "This is pointless, I'm just guessing." They had zero confidence. To them, it felt like they were just pointing randomly into the dark, with literally no information to go on.
And yet, their guesses were right. Not just a little bit better than chance, they were right over 90% of the time. Just let that number sink in. That's not a guess. That is knowledge. Something inside their brain was absolutely seeing that light, even if the person, the conscious them, had no clue.
So this leads to the million-dollar question. How is that even remotely possible? If the main vision center of the brain is broken, where is this information coming from? Well, it turns out our brain doesn't just have one visual system. It has a secret one.
You know, we tend to think of our vision as this single, straightforward thing. Light hits our eyes and we see. But it's actually not that simple. The brain has at least two major pathways for handling everything we see, and blindsight is the perfect example of this.
Okay, so first you have the main highway. This is the pathway that's responsible for the rich, colorful, conscious world you're experiencing right now. Information travels from your eye to the back of your brain to a place called the primary visual cortex, or V1. Think of V1 as the giant movie screen for your mind. In blindsight patients, that screen is broken. But, and this is the key, there's another path, a kind of ancient evolutionary backroad that completely bypasses that main movie screen. Information from the eye can also take a detour to older, more primitive parts of the brain. This pathway is less like a high-def screen and more like a basic, down-and-dirty motion detector.
And here's the crucial part. This secret pathway is fantastic at processing really simple data, like where something is or if it's moving. But it doesn't create a picture. It doesn't generate an experience. It's just raw data. And that's where the patient's guess comes from.
So if the brain can process information without us being aware of it, it kind of blows up our whole idea of what consciousness even is. Blindsight suggests that maybe it's not just one thing.
The philosopher Ned Block came up with a really helpful way to think about this. He said we have two kinds of consciousness. On one hand, you have phenomenal consciousness. That's your subjective experience, what it's like to see the color red or smell coffee. It's your inner movie. But then there's access consciousness. That's just information that your brain has available to use, to guide your actions, to help you reason, to allow you to make a really, really good guess. So, what blindsight really is a stunning, real-world example of these two types of consciousness coming apart. The patient's brain has the information, that's access consciousness. But the person, the subject, has no experience of it, that's the total lack of phenomenal consciousness. The data is in the system, but the inner movie is completely dark. And this realization, this takes us from a fascinating neurological quirk straight into the deep end of the biggest mystery in all of science, the hard problem of consciousness.
So the so-called easy problems of consciousness are about figuring out how the brain functions. You know, how it tells a cat from a dog. The hard problem, a term from philosopher David Chalmers, asks something much more profound. Why does all that brain processing feel like anything on the inside? Why do we have this inner subjective experience at all?
Blindsight is like a perfect scientific scalpel. It cleanly separates the brain's function, locating a light, from the experience of seeing a light. It isolates the hard problem for us, proving that just because your brain is doing something doesn't mean you're going to experience it.
Now, this leads us to a classic and kind of creepy thought experiment called the philosophical zombie. Just imagine a perfect copy of you. It walks like you, talks like you, reacts exactly like you, but on the inside, there's nothing. No feelings, no awareness, no inner life. It's just an incredibly sophisticated machine that's perfectly faking being a person.
Now think about this. In that specific patch of their vision, blindsight patients are kind of like partial zombies. Their brains see and react, but the subjective experience is totally gone. It's the perfect real-world example of that old saying, the lights are on, but nobody's home. The machinery is running, but the conscious observer just isn't there.
And that leaves us with one last massive question to chew on. If your brain can do all this incredible stuff, detect things, locate them, react to the world all without your awareness, then what is your conscious experience actually for? Why would evolution go to all the trouble of producing this rich, vivid, inner movie if so much of the important work can get done in the dark?